3 years in an ice-bound ship, the North Pole itself remained unconquered at the turn of the last century. Many brave men struggled in vain to cross the snowy wastes in the hope of hoisting their flag on top of the world. One of them was Dr. Fridtjof Nansen, the great Norwegian explorer who had made a thorough study of the winds and currents of the Arctic. Believing that a marine current flowing from Siberian waters to the Greenland coast actually passed close to the pole, Nansen decided to put his theory to the test. In September 1893, he allowed his ship, the Fram, to be trapped in the ice floes of the New Siberian Islands. The vessel drifted for 2 years in a northwesterly direction, maintaining an even keel, at latitude 85 degrees 55 north, the farthest north a ship had ever reached. The Fram stopped moving. Nansen and Lieutenant Johnson set off across the ice with dog sledges and Eskimo kayaks. They were within 200 miles of the pole before abandoning the attempt on 8 April 1895 and turning southwards. After spending the next winter in the Franz Joseph Land, living on bear and walrus meat, they returned to Vardø in Norway on 13th August 1896. By an amazing stroke of luck, the Fram broke out of the ice to the north of Spitsbergen in the same week. The entire party reached Oslo together to celebrate one of the most famous expeditions in the history of polar exploration. Franz Joseph Land was now regarded as the most suitable base from which to reach the North Pole. In fact, it was there that members of the British Jackson Harmsworth expeditions had met Nansen by chance and helped him return to Norway. Another party, led by the Duke of Abruzzi, spent New Year's Day 1900 aboard the Stella Polare off Rudolph Island. In the spring, a party of 10 Italians with Umberto Cagni as leader harnessed 100 dogs to their sledges and set off towards the north. They reached a point 20 miles nearer the pole than Nansen had done, and confirmed that in those high latitudes there was no land, only an infinite expanse of snow and bottomless ice. Peary reaches the pole. Finally, the goal that had cost the lives of so many was reached in 1909 by an American commander, R.E. Peary, who 10 years previously had lost 8 toys from frostbite. Oh my god. Peary had then been using the Windward Jackson ship presented to him by Lord Northcliffe. Now in a new ship called the Roosevelt, the Explorer and their supplies were taken to Cape Sheridan in Canada's northmost territory of Grantland. The party with Peary in charge numbered of 23 men, 17 of whom were Eskimos. They had 133 Greenland dogs and 19 sledges. The plan was for small groups to break off at intervals, the bulk of the remaining supplies to be carried by the main party, which grew smaller as it approached the pole. During the journey, the cold became even more intense, disabling some of the men and killing many dogs. Peary pressed on until he was left as planned with 4 Eskimos and 1 compatriot, Hansen, to complete the final 140-mile stage. On 6th April 1909, observations showed that the party had reached the latitude 89 degrees 57 North Pole. The North Pole was only 3 miles distant. Next day, Peary and his companion reached the pole, so completing another chapter in the history of man's exploration of the earth. After making soundings which showed that the polar ice was over 1500 fathoms thick, Peary hoisted the American flag. The party then set off on the return journey to the waiting ship Roosevelt. by aeroplane and dirigible. A new phase of polar exploration now began. Having made the long journey over the ice, man was determined to show that the North Pole could also be conquered from the air. In 1925, Roald Amundsen made an unsuccessful attempt to fly to the pole in a seaplane. Then, on 11th May 1926, Amundsen made a second attempt, this time using a small airship, with his companions Colonel Nobile and Lincoln Ellsworth. Amundsen took off in the Italian dirigible Norge from the base in Spitsbergen. A 3-day flight took them directly over the pole, and they flew on to Teller in Alaska. On landing, they learned that Commander R.E. Byrd, with his co-pilot Floyd Bennett, had circled the polar in an aeroplane and returned just 16 hours before them. 2 years later, General Nobile, as he then was, planned another flight in the airship Italia following a new route over Franz Joseph Land. Unfortunately, the dirigible was caught in a violent storm on its way back and was wrecked on the ice to the east of Spitsbergen. A number of lives were lost, but the survivors, including Nobile, were rescued after camping out for 6 weeks in bitter weather. Among those who took part in the search was Roald Amundsen. He left Bergen in an aeroplane on 17 June 1928, never to be heard of again. So the North Pole claimed its victims right up to the hours of its final defeat and conquest. It is only in the last 30 years that we have learned to live in the frozen wastes of the Arctic. Meteorological stations and scientific research centers are now established in the polar regions. The polar route, the shortest between Europe and the Far East, is now flown regularly by the world's airlines. These polar flights began during World War II, when the American bombers flew from Canada, Europe over the North Pole. On 6 October 1946, an American aeroplane, Punxsutawney Dreamboat, established a long-distance record by flying from Honolulu to Cairo, passing over the magnetic poles. On 15 November 1954, the polar route was opened to passenger flights, a landmark in the history of commercial aviation. On that date, 2 Scandinavian Airlines planes flew the Great Circle route between Los Angeles and Copenhagen. They passed each other flying in opposite direction over the North Pole. Transarctic crossing. In 1969, the British Transarctic expedition under the leadership of Wally Herbert completed the first surface crossing of the frozen Arctic Ocean. This was possible only with the aid of modern radio equipment, homing devices, and air support, and with the skills of sledge travel evolved through generations of the polar exploration. So today we finished the polar exploration, and tomorrow we will be reading about some new subject. Bye bye. Take care.